Hey everybody, it's Marty Walzer, also known as the Raging Owlbear on social media, and it is episode 9 of the ever ongoing running Storm King's Thunder series, which was intended to be a more frequent series about running Storm King's Thunder, and it's kind of become a little bit of a every 2 to 3 week thing on a good month. But here we are, episode 9, and tonight I'm talking about Kraken's Gamble, which, for those of you who may not be familiar, Kraken's Gamble is a side adventure that's on the DM's Guild, and it's not part of the main book, but it does add a little bit of threads to foreshadow the Kraken's involvement, and also the involvement of Lord Dryland. With all of that. So it's if you haven't seen it, it's actually a nice little side trek, and it's a good challenge for the 5th to 7th level realm, and I'll get to the issues with that. But one of the reasons that I decided I was going to run it, because I wasn't sure I was going to do it at first, but one of the things that I thought the main book, doesn't really explain well, or maybe I just need to reread the whole chapter on the Kraken, is what does the Kraken get out of holding Hikaton and teaming up with Imrith, essentially. So Imrith is trying to create havoc among the giants with this whole Hikaton mess, and create difficulties between the small folk and the giants, because she's a dragon and that's her long game. She's like, you know what, I'm a dragon, I hate giants, and we've had this outstanding, sort of Cold War for thousands of years, but let's have the small folk maybe kick some giant butt, and I'm gonna get involved in that. But it kind of made me think, well, what does the Kraken get out of all this? Why would this powerful beast that has its own secret society and is kind of doing its own thing on the coast sort of even want to be involved in this scheme? And so I kind of thought about it. I was like, well, Hikaton is not just a break for the giants. Hikaton may also be a break for things that are happening out in the ocean near the Maelstrom and along the Sword Coast. And the Kraken wants to essentially take over the Sword Coast, or extend its influence at the very least. And perhaps it sees the storm giants as an impediment to that, but it doesn't want to get involved directly. Although, in the book it does obviously get involved directly, but the whole idea is that it wants to be the puppet master, sort of behind the scenes, let Imrith sow all of the deception and difficulties, and its job, the Kraken's job, is just like, look, I'll grab Hikaton and hold him hostage or whatever. So that's just kind of how I'm rationalizing it in my game. You can do what you want. So that brought me around to Kraken's Gamble, which occurs in Yartar, which, on the Sword Coast map is on a river pretty far inland, is not, on the coast. And it has this Aboleth. Spoiler alert, obviously, for those who are players. This is a GM. This is for Dungeon Masters. So it has this Aboleth, Oosith, as the main villain for that particular adventure. And then that sort of made me think, well, what does Oosith get out of this? What is Oosith's involvement? And I decided that the Kraken, in its sort of creating this network of influence and stuff like that, Oosith is essentially a lieutenant of the Kraken. That the Kraken itself is, that maybe the Krakens and the Aboleths are actually related, or maybe the Kraken is just another variety of Aboleth. It's just a bigger Aboleth style beast. And so there's a relationship, whatever. And so the Kraken has recruited these other Aboleths to sort of be part of its network, and said, okay, hey, you can control you do some of my work in Yartar, and Yartar is yours, or whatever. however they decide they want to. Who knows how an Aboleth sees power? Of course, that brings up a whole other issue. What is it that Aboleths want? Why do they want power? But it's D&D. They're the big crime boss. Whatever. They're the Huts, the functional equivalent of the Huts or something. I don't know. So I decided in my game that Oosith was going to be lieutenant of the Kraken, that Yartar was his job. That was just to sort of sow discontent there and create a way for Lord Dryland to become the harbor master, guy, river master, whatever his title is. And essentially that was how the Kraken was starting to get its agents in places of power. So Kraken's game will fit sort of right into that idea, or when I read it, I was like, oh, this creates a puzzle piece for me that wasn't really answered. And so I pretty much decided that, to run it pretty close to how it was written. I mean, again, I was creating some extra backstory just for my own purposes. And, who knows if the PCs use a divination spell or they do something else. I wanted to have those answers, that sort of backstory, why is this person involved, or what is their job, blah, blah, blah. I wanted to have some of that fodder just in case they did some exploration, which they inevitably didn't do anyway. So that's fine. Here's a tip for anybody who is a DM who plays off. So divination is super powerful and you can learn all kinds of crap, and nobody, at least in the games I've been in, it very rarely gets taken advantage of. And I know the DM is obviously not going to give you everything when you cast those kinds of spells, but I'm surprised that my players haven't tried to spring that on me. So it's more of that kind of fact-finding, stuff with using spells or other means. Be that as it may, tangent. So I decided to bring the, try to lure the PCs to Yartar to run this particular adventure. And so I've kind of been stringing this one out because I've been thinking how, when is this going to happen? Or, what is the hook that gets them involved in this? And so what I inevitably decided to do is I tied it in with the giant slaying sword. So there's a hook early on in the adventure that says, hey, if you go to, I guess the gal in Triboar says, if you go to my friend, he's got a giant slaying sword. And then you go to the friend, and the friend's like, no, my son stole it. He's living with some dirty, low-down thief in Yartar. See if you can get it. And then they set up sort of a mini boss villain to, oh, how am I going to get the sword from this guy? Well, I decided to get a little bit even more complicated with that. So the son does steal a sword. He takes it to Yartar, and he's living with his gal, who's part of the Hand. And Oosith, in doing the Kraken's bidding and also extending his roots out, Oosith's agents are infiltrating the Hand of Yartar. So he's starting to take over the Thieves Guild there. In ways, using his power, his domination, mind control stuff, and just, getting cultists in positions, whatever. But, he's just using his agents to slowly take over the Hand of Yartar. And what I decided is that the lady thief, who is the girlfriend of the guy who has the giant slaying sword, which in my campaign is a giant slaying axe, because my players like axes, so I changed it to an axe. But that fellow has the axe, and he gets murdered. And his girlfriend is sort of on the run. She's hiding somewhere in Yartar because she knows too much. She saw too much, whatever. But so she knows that there's some dark force that's taking over the Hand of Yartar, and she just wants to get the heck out of Dodge. Her boyfriend was killed. She thinks she's the next target, when honestly they don't care that much about her. But she's freaking out. And so I'm taking a trail that's going to lead the PCs to her. And then she is going to put out that part of she did. We already played through this, actually. So she puts out this information about, there's this dark force, and, there's something taking over the Hand of Yartar, and there's other things at work. And she says, I saw the people who took my boyfriend away or whatever. And she thinks they have a hideout in the sewers, something like that. So I teased that hook because I wanted Oosith to have that axe. That axe is down in the sewer lair with Oosith. And so then, I basically just found ways to string them along to get them to the casino boat. Okay, they're investigating Yartar. I kind of did a few different things in Yartar to lay out some mysteries and whatnot. But eventually they're going to go to the boat. They had been there before because I actually even pre-foreshadowed the boat in an earlier session. So they've met Lord Dryland already, and they just think of him. Oh, he's just this politician. He's a regular dude. He's a nice guy. Whatever, They just think he's a guy. So I'm bringing them back to the boat so they can meet the Purple Lady, and so that's going to start that. I mean, that did start that whole hook into the larger Kraken's Gamble plot. Oh yeah, sorry, I jumped ahead myself. They did find the noble that was encased in the sort of eggshell thing along the waterways going into Yartar. So I even set all that up. So they visited the nobles, found out a few of them are missing. They found the gal. They found the thief who was hiding. So they talked to the noble families with the missing nobles. So I gave them a lot of different clues to sort of lead them in a direction. And so of course that's going to lead them to the Purple Lady. That led them to the Purple Lady. I keep talking in the future tense, but we've already run the game. But for you could use these same ideas. There's like I said, there's a fellow with a giant sling sword out there. There's the hook that's actually in the module itself, but you can find ways to get your PCs to Yartar for other reasons. So it doesn't seem like you're just spoon feeding them this particular plot hook to get them to say, oh, hey, there's a an NPC with the exclamation point above their head or whatever, the question mark, click on him, click on NPC, get quest, go. You can try to make it a little bit more naturalistic how they find this particular quest. So as I mentioned, I ran that part pretty much as it was written. I tried to sort of, like I said, foreshadow the whole idea that something larger is going on in the city without necessarily giving away that it had anything to do with Dryland. Let's see what else. Yeah, actually that was pretty much what all of it for the hooks. There's because the players are already probably traveling through Yartar anyways, there's a lot of good ways that you can kind of tease this adventure to them, and it plays really well. So now in terms of actually running Kraken's Gamble, there's, depending upon what level your party is when you hit this, from the other DMs that I've talked to on Facebook and whatnot, this particular module seems like it can swing really hard suddenly in one direction or the other. Like it's not in the middle. It's either way too hard, depending upon the power of the group, or it's way too easy. From what I've read and all the threads, it seems like either it was a total cakewalk, or it was like murder death right out of the gate. And again, this is going to depend on a couple of significant factors, which I'll try to get into. So my challenge with running this adventure is my group was a 6-player group, and they were already level 7, if I recall. I think they had already leveled up to 7. They weren't still level 6. I might have to look back at my notes, but be that as it may, they had a lot of firepower. I mean, they'd come into other encounters that I thought were going to be very difficult, and then just swept them off the table pretty easy. So I knew running this as written would probably not be too challenging because they just fight a few Koa Toa and the Udia on that first level, and then they go down to fight Oosith, and they're gonna have everything. I mean, they're gonna be long rested, they're fully powered, so they've got all of their power at their disposal. And so this is what can make this particular adventure more challenging, is that because they are going to be loaded for bear, ready for trouble, and they're going to go in there and they're going to drop their A bombs or their hydrogen bombs on whatever is down there in the sewers. So there's not a lot of good resource draining that occurs before they really get to the big bad in this, because it's a short module. You know, there's a small encounter in that first room. There's some gray oozes. You can bring in some more Koa Toa, and then they go in the large room, and yeah, there's the Udia and the Koa Toa, and then they're downstairs. So it's pretty like bam, bam, bam. Three encounters, 2 minor combats, and then 1 bigger combat. So for my group, being that they were, you know, level 7, I obviously immediately made, you know, super powered the gray oozes, you know, put them at their maximum hit points. I, you know, when they went into the larger sewer, I had 2 Udias instead of just 1. And then I had the Koa Toa, and I used in the book, there's the Koa Toa, and then there's the whips, the spell casting Koa Toa. So I had both the warrior Koa Toas and the whips. And the nice thing about being in the dark sewer is that the whips have something like 120 feet of dark vision. The Koa Toa have really long dark vision, and most of my characters only have 60 feet of dark vision. So that means the spellcasters can stay in the edge of the darkness outside of where the players can see them. So they're always attacking an advantage, or, you know, these spells are, you know, boom, 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 going off wherever. The players don't know where to attack. So that's one way you can kind of really frighten your characters a little bit. Now, you know, the whips aren't that strong, so once the players figure out where they are, or they, you know, they're going to go down very quickly. But you know, it definitely helped to when the characters engaged the Udias, all the Koa Toa basically stayed hidden as much as possible. They were in that center pool, and you know, I had them stay out of. It worked out well because my PCs went exactly where I thought they would go. They kind of floated around, went over. I made the Udias make some noise, like they're slurping through the mud in their little pools over there. So they heard this squishy noise, so they went right to that, encountered the Udias, and then while they were engaged with the Udias, the Koa Toas came up from behind them and tried to sneak attack and do stuff like that. You know, use the man catchers to restrain the characters, cast spells from a distance, you know, did all kinds of fun, interesting stuff to make that encounter a little bit more challenging for, you know, a group of level 7s. With a group of level 5s, level 6s, well, I mean, 6s, they do pretty well too. So there's not a huge leap between, you know, 6 and 7. There's a bigger leap between 5 and 7. But you're going to have to kind of, you know, depending upon whether you care about encounter balance or not, you know, whether you want to just be like, look, I'm just going to write it as written, and if they, you know, fly through it, great. If they, you know, it's up to you, you know. But you want to give them, especially if they're powerful, you want to give them a little bit of challenge just to make it fun. So even if you don't care about encounter balance, and I usually don't, I don't look at, you know, the CR. I just think in my head, okay, I got 6 people. How am I going to engage them enough that they can't just nuke one foe, nuke the next foe, and then boom, 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 just like bang, 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 bang. Because if they focus their fire, they can do over 100 hit points in a round. I mean, if everybody focuses all their fire on one creature, that's 100 hit points. Boom, that thing's done. If there's two dudes that are only 50 or 60 hit points each, boom, boom, there's 2 people that are going to go down right away. So I know about what the damage output of my group is roughly if they all do you know, fairly well in the rounds. So the whole idea is you need to get them to spread their fire, because if they focus fire, they're going to kill everything real quick. So you want them to be distracted. Like I said, you know, guys are shooting them from the darkness. People are attacking them from behind. The Udyas are engaging from the front. So there's a real art to making sure that they are distracted enough that they don't get to focus as much as they can. Now they're still going to do it. If they're good players, they're going to think, you know what, I'm going to take a little bit of damage from these guys behind me. They're not that strong, and let's get the Udyas down first. Let's knock them down, and then let's see if we can take care of the spellcast. Whatever. If they use good tactics, they'll be fine. But it's nice to give them a little something to chew on. So I think when I ended up doing, like I said, I had the 2 Udyas. I only put in 2 spellcasters, and then I had like 4 of the regular Koa Toa fighter types. So I didn't, it wasn't too much. I gave them a couple extra foes just to keep them busy. But I didn't want to overwhelm them. Also, I wanted this just to be a kind of like oh wow, something's going on down here in the sewers. So there was that. So that went pretty well. And the other thing I wanted to do too is, I mean, obviously in the module, if combat breaks out on the second floor or whatever, on the floor above, the Aboleth just knows because it's got telepathy and all that stuff. But I wanted to also make it so those spellcasters, if all their buddies were basically getting wiped out and they were going to get wiped out, they were going to flee down to support the boss man. It just made sense in my mind that, okay, they see all their friends going down there, like, oh shit, I got to go somewhere where I got to run, and I got to get somewhere where I'm going to be able to, have some safety. So yeah, they took out one of the spellcasters, and the other spellcaster ran immediately to the hole down that led down to the next level. And of course, that was where the glyph of warding is too. So if your PCs run after him, try to follow him right away, boom, they get a face full of whatever thunder wave. But so the Koa Toa goes down, and so that also gave me an extra caster downstairs. And I made a few mistakes in the downstairs encounter, which I'll talk about in a minute. But that worked out pretty well. So the next encounter, actually, let me, I got to grab something real quick. I forgot to get it for the stream. I'm going to grab it real quick to show you guys something. So one of the things I wanted to do with the encounter downstairs. So actually, I spent a lot of time on this particular module. I had some Dwarven Forge and some other stuff I had 3D printed. And so I did the whole upstairs sewer area, in like 3D terrain to really, make it cool. Because I wanted them to come down there and be like, oh, wow, this is really neat. And kind of make an impression with that part of the adventure. And so that was a lot of fun. And then, the other thing that was interesting about the lower level is you have the giant pool of water, and then you have just basically these walkways, these cat walkways around the outside. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted a little bit of sense of elevation because, the water is up to the catwalk at first, but I wanted to give a sense that there's some depth to the pools there. And, and that also makes a difference if they're turning the valves and it starts to go down or starts to go up. So I just quickly crafted some terrain, because it's really simple. I had some, this styrofoam packing stuff from whatever, old TV boxes, stuff like that. And other places that you can just, anytime you get a package with something heavy in it, packed in it, it comes with the foam. So all I did is I just took some craft paint and I put a foam core board on top that I had carved in my squares. Sorry about that. That's my phone's going off. So, I just made a little simple grid and made a few of these so I could just set up a oh, hey, here's a place that you can walk. And then I had a blue, under layer, a blue like mat underneath. But what that gave, the PCs, the minis that had up here on the grid, is that it gave us a feeling of depth. That they were on these catwalks, that they're moving around on these catwalks, and as the water moved up and down, there was this pool. And so, I think that little bit of visual, if you play on the grid, that little bit of visual to give that 3 inches or whatever of height to your walkways instead of just drawing it on a flat map, is really nice. It looked great. And, and again, I just craft painted some styrofoam, and I took a knife and made a ridge, and, I just measured the square grids and dug out the squares on the foam, painted it up, and then there you go. There's your catwalk, and then now I can use this for a million other things. I made a really long one. And I got a long catwalk, whatever, 3 inches by 18. I got a medium one, got shorter ones. So this is I know a lot of you guys probably don't craft, but this is just kind of a really cheap and easy way to make some neat 3D effects for your game. Is I made the center island that had the valves in the corner, so I just cut a piece of foam into a circle and mounted it on a pillar. There you go. There's your center island. Put the walkway up to it. Boom. So I'm going to put some pictures on the blog of the setups I did for this, because I think they actually turn out really nice. And again, this stuff was really easy. Gray paint, a little brown, like a burnt umber brown, some light brown, and sponge it. Painted it gray and then sponge the different texture colors on it. And so you can kind of see I got all kinds of neat stone and earth and mud texture on it when you look really close. And you look on there's a lot of guys that do this type of crafting. This was super simple. Again, this took me a couple hours one night. I already had a lot of this crap foam lying around because I save it every time I get a package with crap foam. I save it, put it in a closet, and so that way I can pull it out for a quick craft like this if I want to build some fun walkways or whatever. But something to consider, you don't have to have Dwarven Forge or some fancy thing that costs, don't have a 3D printer, don't have Dwarven Forge. Man, there's foam is out there. It's super cheap. It's in everything that people ship. There's dollar store foam too. There's you can get a big poster board size piece of foam for a couple bucks. And there's the stuff you get at the hardware store. Anyways, that's a tangent. Sorry, taking too long, but it's a nice way to add a little extra something to your game. So encounter 2. So again, there was a couple things I wanted to do with encounter 2 to make it not too difficult, because one of the things that happens again with a party like mine, where they can dump 100 hit points of damage on something in one round. The thing about the Aboleth is it's once the characters can start focusing fire on it, it's actually not that strong. It has a lot of cool lair powers and other stuff like that. But it will die pretty quickly once they start. If they can get rid of the minions quickly and they can focus fire on the creature, yeah, it's that's one of the challenges of the Aboleths, is that they on paper they look really powerful, and they can be, depending upon how things roll, they can be really powerful. And so here's my characters actually didn't have too much of a problem, and there was 2 things that I don't want to say did wrong, but probably could have changed the tactics of the creature or changed the scenario slightly to make it so that it was a little bit challenging. They still felt challenged, but it wasn't that hard. I mean, it really wasn't. And let me tell you, number one, Banishment is not your friend as a DM. Banishment is bad because if they know where the big bad is and they have just the minions, banish, boom, big bad goes away. They clean up the minions. They wait a minute for the big bad to come in, focus fire, he's done. So there's a couple ways to counter Banishment. And I had actually kind of thought of these before playing the game, but I didn't do it. I don't know why. I let them banish. They said, oh, we're going to banish the big guy. And I was like, all right. I just rolled the saving throw as normal. He failed to save. He's gone. And in retrospect, I had considered ways to get around the banishment. And then in retrospect, I was like, wow, I should have implemented those because it would have been a much more exciting fight. I thought, I don't mind them having a fairly easy victory because they can feel powerful and stuff like that. But it was a little bit too easy. They had a harder time with the Koa Toas and the Udyas than they did for the big guy coming down. So there's a couple things about Banishment. The Hallow spell, or Unhallow, as it were. Aboleths are supposed to be these nearly eternal creatures that even when you kill them on the prime material plane, they go back to the elemental plane of water, they regenerate there, and then eventually make their way back onto the prime material plane. So they're supposed to be thousands and thousands, maybe millions of years old, whatever. So the lore supports the idea that these things are nearly immortal. So something like a banishment spell shouldn't be like a problem for them. They've had time to think and plan, and they're supposed to be really intelligent, and they've lived for a long time, so they would know, here are the things that are a danger to me as a creature on the material plane. So that they could use their domination spell to get a caster to cast Unhallow, and what the Hallow spell does is it has these benefits it creates basically a bubble of either holy or unholy area in a space, and one of the things it can do is guard against planar travel, which means in or out. So people can't gate in or teleport in, but they also can't banish people out. It's just this bubble of protection from those types of movement spells, gates, etc., teleport. So being that this thing is thousands of years old and it sets up a lair, it's going to find someone or have some sort of way to get this Unhallow cast in its lair area. It just makes sense that it would dominate a spellcaster. It would find somebody to do its bidding, either by spending the cash, like getting one of its cultists to say, hey, can you cast a spell, no questions asked? Here's 10,000 gold, or whatever. The whole idea is that this nearly immortal creature would think of a way to get the spell cast on their lair. So that's one way. Two, you can add legendary resistances to this guy's supposed to be a pretty badass dude. I didn't add any legendary resistances. I probably should have given him one or something just to make it a little bit more, oh man, scary for the players to say, oh wow, this is a big boss. This is an important fight. I ran him a little bit closer to how it's written in the book, in the monster manual. I would definitely go back and do that again. I would go back and add legendary resistances. So that's the thing about the banishment that is important. Other things that became an issue with the fight is that in the module it says, hey, if you do some damage to the marrow or whatnot, they get a new save against their domination. So they might actually go and attack the Aboleth for you. So you have the Koa Toa that are just worship the Aboleth. They are true cultists. They believe in this creature and they're not going to go away. There's no reason that you couldn't decide as the DM, for the purpose of story, that the marrow are also have been cultivated, that they're cultists. They don't follow the Aboleth because they're dominated. They follow the Aboleth because it's, you know, it's they're part of the larger conspiracy that's happening in the area, you know, that they so, you know, you don't have to necessarily have the minions be freed, you know, from their domination. They could be, you know, true devotees to the creature. So I should have done that as well, because they attacked some of the marrow. I had one of the marrows, his domination got broken, and so he went off to try to go attack the Aboleth as well. And honestly, they were at that point. I probably should have just been like, no, whatever. He's just going to keep attacking, because I knew they were going to do pretty well in this encounter. The way things are starting to go. So, you know, why not make it a little bit more challenging, just for the purpose of making that combat fun for them? The other thing that there's a couple things that I actually did do to throw the PCs off, and this was suggested by somebody in the Facebook group, is when they went down to the sewer. Now I can't remember what parts of this were actually in the module versus what parts of this were suggested by the Facebook posts, but he did a phantom image, a phantasmal image, whatever, the Phantasmal Force, to, you know, the purple lady believes he's a sorcerer, and everything that the PCs have been told up to this point is that there's a magic user down there, of some sort, a sorcerer, a wizard, something, but a humanoid, not something else. So when they came down, I had him standing outside of the little room that's on the far end of the thing, and he just said, he tried to make a deal with the PCs. His illusion of this sorcerer said, hey, look, I know I have some things that you want. You know, there's an axe. There's a, you know, he knows what the players want. He has that telepathic ability to know what their desires are. So he says, look, let's set this unpleasantness aside. You don't have to get involved in my business. I won't get involved in yours. You can take what's in the room. I have the noble that you're looking for. He's in the room. I've got the axe of giant slaying or whatever. I've got this treasure. You guys can have all of that, no questions asked, if you just walk away. So just go in, get your stuff, and walk away. Of course, that's supposed to be the trap. They go in there, and then the water starts to fill. The whole room starts to fill with the water. They weren't entirely buying it. You know, they knew there was something, you know, out of. So I had the Aboleth was hiding in the water. He was concealed completely. The illusion was on the catwalk by the room. I had the other minions, you know, positioned where they're positioned in the module. And he basically said, hey, let's talk, let's parlay. And I tried to see where the PCs would take it. So, but eventually, of course, all hell broke loose at some point. Somebody attacked, or somebody did something. Oh, and the thing about the illusion, which confused my players even more, I rolled their saving throws in secret for the Phantasmal Force. So they could all hear the creature speaking in their minds telepathically, but only about half the party saw a sorcerer guy standing out on the catwalk, and the other half did not. So they weren't sure what the actual illusion was. They thought maybe actually the sorcerer was there and that he had cast an illusion on himself, and half the party saw through it and saw the sorcerer, and the other half of the party didn't see him at all. So he was invisible to them or whatever, but that threw them off. They had no idea it was actually an Aboleth, and that the people who were seeing nothing were the people who made their saves rather than the people who failed. So I didn't tell them what their role. Like I rolled the saving throws for them so they wouldn't get that meta knowledge of, oh, I failed the save and there's nothing then, and there's a sorcerer there, or I made the save and there's no sorcerer there. Therefore, that is the illusion. I didn't want them to make that meta game assumption. So I just said, some of you see the sorcerer and some of you do not. It's clear that this party member and this party member are talking to a person that's standing there. You are standing there and you don't see anybody there. and you don't see anybody there. The three of you see this guy standing here. The other three of you do not see anybody standing there. So that actually, you know, created an interesting dynamic there, because I tried not to let them do a whole lot of meta discussion because they were in the room, and I didn't want them to have these sidebar conversations with each other to say, what's going on? What's all going on? I was like, no, if you're going to have those conversations, they can hear. Everybody in that room can hear what you're saying. So there's none of this side strategy stuff. You know, we're going to play it. We're going to play it, role play it at the table. You know, you're there. You can say something to your other fellow PCs. You're saying it out loud, unless you have a spell that allows you to communicate outside of talking. You have to talk, and then they can hear. But that actually worked out really well. I mean, like, so they thought the sorcerer was in there, and I had him open the door. The illusion opened the door and went inside the room. So there was, some, especially when combat broke out, there was like, okay, now there's confusion because they're trying to take down the creatures, the minions, but the Aboleth was not attacking physically. I was trying to have him use lair actions and all the other stuff to not reveal himself because he was hidden in the muck underneath the water. So he was not going to be revealed unless they actually lowered the water level, and then they'd be like, oh wait, there's something over there. So that was actually a really good part of that was a really good idea for whomever was on Facebook that posted their version of it, that they did the same thing. They projected a sorcerer. That worked out really well for my game as well, because it confused the PCs. They thought they were fighting. They actually thought they were fighting this illusionist sorcerer guy or something. So they were trying to they never quite figured out that there was an Aboleth until the water level actually drained down. And then there's like, oh, wait, there's this big squishy thing in the corner over here. Hidden. So that brings me back to, let me back up a second to explain the scenario when they came in. Like I said, they talked to the sorcerer. So there's a couple different things that I wanted to do to make sure that this encounter was realistic and engaging. Is the Aboleth was hiding. The Aboleth had an escape route. So I had decided that, like I said, this thing's been alive for thousands of years. It's not going to leave itself, high and dry. If they start to drain the tank, so to speak, and they can pile on to him, I had another sewer drain that he was going to dunk down, because it didn't make sense for him not to have a way out. He's a pretty and super intelligent being that's been around for thousands of years. He's going to have a back door. So I give him a back door. Had him again. He was in the water, in the dark, and it's like a dark, muddy, sewery water. So he had concealment, not just cover, but total concealment. But because he's telepathic, he could, still use his lair actions and do stuff like that, because he kind of knew. Well, with the lair actions, you don't have to target people, because he does the thing where he washes the wave onto the platform to try to sweep people into the water, and then he can use the water shocking power. And so that was the other thing, is that look at the Aboleth's lair actions and the legendary actions, and you can kind of beef up what he can do, because when you have if you have a big party, a 6-person party like I did, it helps if he can do a lot of different fun things. And the lair actions and legendary actions are not that exciting. I mean, I do like the one where he can cause the water to sweep people off, basically come up, grab a person, and sweep them off their feet into the water. That's a great one. And then, of course, anybody who gets swept in the water, he can follow up immediately with like the shocking effect. So I use that a lot, because it drains hit points. The shock effect is not that powerful, though. So while it does drain some hit points, it doesn't. It's not deadly right away for a higher level party. And again, this is going to vary wildly based upon your party makeup and level. And then there's one other thing that I did not do well that I probably should have. He has that domination power, and that is his action. That is his main action, if I recall correctly. So, in order to not totally gank the party, when they cause the Marrow to start to turn and attack him, he used the domination power on the Marrow. And honestly, to make it exciting, he really should just have focused on the PCs. You pick the spellcaster, you pick the heavy damage dealer, you pick somebody in the party that if they turn, it's going to make a huge difference. And I did try that on one attempt, but the player made their saves. And actually, I had players that were making good saves. When the water would sweep up and try to sweep them in the water, they were making their saves for that. They were doing lots of stuff. So, and when I tried to dominate them, I was like, oh, they made a save. And then I spent one action trying to do the domination on the Marrow, which I probably should just be like, screw it. So yeah, if you want to make it more challenging, if you can dominate one of the spellcasters, that can really change the tide of the encounter a lot. But that can be very dangerous. I don't always like to do a domination on a player because it feels a little bit like I'm taking away all of their power in the game because they're just sitting there like I can't do anything, and somebody else is casting all my spells against my party. So I'm a little hesitant to break out that power right away, but especially once they start doing some damage on the creature, and I want to make it a little more scary, turn the tables on them, boom, dominate. But I didn't use it that well. It really didn't come into effect at all in the combat. But that's one of the things that can make this combat very dangerous, because if the players are good and they make their saves, it's no problem. They're probably going to walk over the Aboleth. But if the Aboleth is able to take control of one particularly powerful character that has spells or is a melee, badass, a monk or a fighter with action surges, or just somebody that can start to really deal some damage against their own party, that's when things can get really dangerous. So again, with my group, they didn't have any problem. They got all the valves open. The water level dropped very quickly. That's another thing you can play around with. Change the drainage rate or change the inflow rate if you want. Because once they go underwater, then it becomes a lot harder. I know a lot of people were saying, "Oh, it's impossible if they go underwater," but the underwater breathing rules are really, really forgiving in 5th edition. As a matter of fact, I saw there was a couple people that suggested alternate underwater fighting rules because, somebody with even a 10 constitution can hold their breath for like 10 rounds, without a problem. And a fight isn't going to last 10 rounds. So, some people were saying, "Oh yeah, once the players are underwater, it's going to become a TPK." No, it really isn't. As long as they can get down to those valves and start opening them back up again, it's not that dangerous. I felt, because no combat is going to last those 10 rounds that the players are underwater. The combat's either going to be over because they killed everything, or they're going to get down to those valves and start draining it right away. So I thought the valves were more of just a distraction. And again, if you maybe you can change the flow rate so that it's a little harder for the PCs to get that water to go down, because once they have them all open, the water drops quickly. Even if both of the intake valves are coming in at their full volume, if all the outtake valves are open, it still goes down fairly quickly. And so that's what they did. They banished in my game, they banished the dude, they drained that stuff down to the sewer mud, waited for him to pop back in, and then he had to fight for a couple rounds, but was getting really beat up. And so I said, he's getting out of there. So he went down an alternate drain hole. So now they have an Aboleth that's a near immortal being that's pissed off at them. So that I can bring that back maybe later. I'm pocketing that one to try to figure out what I'm going to do with that. The creature is still in Yartar. I don't know. It's not going to chase them. So maybe just when they come back in Yartar, assassins or something, I'll have to figure out how to make him an ongoing enemy. Or maybe I'll just be like, as they move on with the plot line, they might just leave Yartar behind, and maybe they never see him again. Who knows? Haven't figured out that far yet. They haven't even gotten to the eye of the Allfather. They're like running all around my game world, and like 7th level already, and I'm only just getting into the eye. Not even the next coming sessions. They're in another sidetrack that I threw out there for fun. So yeah, they're just having fun doing different little adventures that I'm throwing in. I kind of, I'm almost the edge of abandoning the main storyline because they've gone so far afield. But I think they're going to go to the Eye of the Allfather soon, and then I'll just throw them right into the end game, probably pretty quickly. We'll see how that goes. But to recap, if you think that particular encounter with the Aboleth is not going to be challenging enough, given your party's level, or you believe that, as I do, that the Aboleth is really intelligent and it's been alive for thousands of years, and there's a reason for that, well, then, again, so here's ways: more minions, more devoted minions who aren't just dominated, but are actually true cultists of the Aboleth. The water provides concealment. His Phantasmal Force can be cast prior to the combat so that the sorcerer is waiting for them to walk into the door, basically, to say, they come in the door, and the sorcerer, the illusionary sorcerer, is saying, hey guys, wait up, we don't have to fight, let's talk this one out. So he can try to trick them into a position that's more, dangerous for them. Use the lair actions, use the legendary actions, mix and match them if you want to, go through the book and decide, you can try to even beef them up a little bit, or I know, like one of them, I think the legendary actions get triggered on the 20, or maybe it's the lair actions, and then the other ones get triggered every other time a player moves. Mix and match which ones make the most sense. Change a lair to a legendary action, or a legendary action into a lair action to switch them up if you feel like, hey, this would make a more fun synergy or whatever. And give them some little extra oomph. And the domination, use the domination, not against the marrow, not against his own minions. Make them loyal. And so that way he can power against the PCs. And, maybe you can rule it that he can only dominate one at a time. I don't remember how it's written. I think he actually can dominate more than one at once. It's not like a concentration spell, but you could change that. You could just say, no, against the PCs, he can only dominate one guy at a time. So that way it's not like, you're dominated. Okay, it's 5 guys against you. You're dead. Y'all TPK'd. Now, give him some more fun stuff to do, but don't screw the players. So like I said, I like the lair action where the water sweeps them, and the waves sweep them off the catwalks into the water, and then he does the psychic shock. It's like the giant, lightning bolt into the water idea. So yeah, make sure he has an escape plan. He's going to get beat up on. If they really kill him really quickly, then yeah, maybe he doesn't get to run away. But like I said, I had him hiding pretty much till the very end, until the water got low enough that they could look around and see like, oh, hey, and I tried to have him use an illusion to distract them so they wouldn't spot him even with the water lowering. But of course it ended up not being good enough anyways. Somebody saw through the illusion. It's like, there's the bad guy. Let's take care of him. They started damaging him, and then I just had him disengage and slurp down the sewer tunnel. And then I was like, you guys can follow him into this flooded sewer tunnel if you want. And they're like, no, no, thank you. We're gonna take our chances that maybe we'll see him in a future date. But so he gets away. Aboleth gets away. The characters get their giant slaying sword or axe or whatever. I threw some other treasure in there from obviously the nobles had some treasure. So they solve the mystery of the nobles disappearing. Um, the purple lady disappeared also. She, once she realized that they had killed her boss, she was not sticking around. So she's just laying low until, well, he's not actually dead. She doesn't necessarily know that yet, but he'll make an appearance, re-recruit her, bring her back in the fold, and then they can resume their machinations in Yartar. So it also leaves me the possibility that if the players want to go back to Yartar and take care of the threat there, that's another thing that's going on in the campaign. It doesn't concern the Giants directly. It's just this other thing that's going on in one of the cities. And if they want to get involved in that, great. That's another hook that they have. If they don't, then it'll just play out in the background. I'll just decide what happens if the players ignore that completely and they let the Aboleths take over the Thieves Guild there or whatever. And again, they haven't made the connection to Dryland yet. I mean, they know that the lady was on the riverboat, but they haven't necessarily said that. They don't necessarily suspect the Dryland is a key figure in this. They just think the lady just was using his casino as her way to meet people or whatever. So I keep throwing out possible clues. They're not necessarily picking up on them. They're not using divination. They're not doing things that they could be doing to find the larger plot. But that's fine. I'm going to lead them to the Eye of the Allfather. They've already gotten some of that. I finally introduced Zephyrus. I didn't like how he was in the original chapter 2. I thought it was totally lame the way they introduced him to the storyline. So I brought him in. He's a friend of Harshnag, because he's kind of this cloud giant that's on his own and doing crazy stuff. And Harshnag is on his own, or in my game, her own, doing non-frost giant stuff. So they're two fish out of water, and so they know each other. They get along okay. They don't buddy around, but they're aware of each other. They're light allies. They're acquainted allies, I guess you would say. So I brought Zephyrus in, got my guys on board with that. He dumped some plot hook to them, and then he says, "Hey, I'm going to take you up to the Bryn Shander area. I'm going to drop you off, and you can go meet Harshnag because she has something that she wants you to do or wants help with or whatever." But that's past the Kraken's gamble. But that was it. That was Kraken's gamble. And it's a good module, and especially if you consider the tactics of the Aboleth. If you really read up on the Aboleth, the lore, and all of his Lair and Legendary actions, and think about how can I use those actions to really make a fun fight for the PCs, and make it scary. You do have to be careful, especially if you beef up what they can do. If you beef up what the foes can do, it can swing towards a TPK pretty quickly if you're not careful. But my players didn't have too much difficulty, especially once they focus fire on the Aboleth. They take a little damage from the marrow, or they take a little damage from the other minions, but those guys only do a little bit of damage. They're not doing these huge massive 3d8 or anything like that. They're poking people with spears or doing whatnot. So they're actually his minions are actually kind of pretty wimpy. They're really there as distractions. So if the players focus fire on him, he's just going to run away and leave his poor minions to die. And that's essentially what happened. He ran away after he was banished. So, but yeah, you take away the banishment action, that changes the whole combat, because instead of him going away and them able to easily clean up the real weak minions, the relatively weak minions comparatively, if he stays in the fight, that's a different thing. So that's, if you're going to do any of these things, that's the one I would say to do. You can run everything else exactly as written, but I would definitely say use the Unhallow spell to remove the possibility of banishment, or give him a legendary resistance. one or two if you choose. But yeah, this creature's smart. It's been around for thousands of years. It understands that if it gets banished, it's going back to its elemental plane of water. So it's gonna have protections against those kinds of things. It makes sense within the idea of the plot. It makes sense that he would not be banishable. And I wish they had. That's the one thing that I wish the author had written into the text of the module. But otherwise, it's a really nice, easy module to run. So that's pretty much it. That's my whole thing. I actually went on pretty long talking about that one adventure, probably longer than it took you to read it. But I hope this was helpful in talking about the tactics and the things you can do with this adventure. So that was episode 9. I'm Raging Owlbear, Marty Walser. Running Storm King's Thunder is this series, and hopefully I will do another episode without letting a month and a half lapse, or however long it was, a long time lapse between episodes. All right, have a good day and enjoy the rest of Storm King's Thunder.